Welcome to Divorce and Relationships Decoded, the show that takes the guesswork out of love, loss, and everything in between. Hosted by me, Jennifer Perri, a CDC-certified divorce and empowerment coach, and Dr. Deborah Wilder, a divorce and relationship expert. This is the place where real conversations meet expert advice. So get ready to decode divorce and relationships like never before. Divorce and Relationships Decoded starts now. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. I am one of your hosts, Jennifer Perri. I'm a certified divorce coach, and I am joined by Dr. Deborah Wilder, who is a divorce and relationship specialist. Hello, my friend. Good to see you again.
Hi, Jennifer. It's good to see you too.
So today we're going to talk about parenting challenges, primarily with divorce and how it affects children. So, Dr. Wilder, how do you see just navigating the process from the very beginning through the divorce? How do you see it affecting the children of the people that you help?
But it's interesting because I've worked with families where the kids are like, it's about time. This should have happened a long time ago. What took you so long? To other children who are just devastated. And something interesting too is there's been research done on how divorce affects children at different ages and stages of their lives, but even with adult children. I think, if I recall correctly, which is questionable these days, but if I recall correctly, when a divorce happens and the kids are younger, they still believe in marriage, but they're not quite sure if they believe in love, like love lasting. I'm not quite sure, but it's something along those lines. And with older children, like even adult children, they believe in love also, but not necessarily in marriage as well. So there's something maybe a little bit different. One kind of believes more that love will prevail versus a marriage, and others might feel that marriage kind of prevails, but love doesn't. So I can't remember exactly what that was, but even in adult children, they are affected by their parents' divorce. And we're seeing a lot more of what's called a gray divorce, which is the older parents. I shouldn't say older, but let's say, I think 50. And folks who are 50, I'm way beyond that, but folks who are 50 and older, I think are considered what would be called a gray divorce. So we're seeing more and more of that. I've been working with people even in their 70s who are getting divorced. But with the little kids, let's talk about the little kids for a moment. With the little ones, let's say up to age 2 or 3, they don't necessarily know what's going on. They can adapt usually very well, as long as there isn't this awful conflict, which is going to affect everybody. But let's say 3 to 5 or 6, what you might see is regression in sleep or in wetting the bed or clinginess, that separation anxiety. You might see some more misbehavior or isolation in schools and with their, like in I guess, school settings or with their friends and even family. With the elementary school kids, you might see some grades falling. This is the same thing from elementary school and beyond, even through high school and college. But you'll see, again, maybe some regression, some extra sadness, confusion, insecurity, and anxiety. Middle school, you're going to see that too, but you're also going to see maybe a little more embarrassment because the kids socially might feel uncomfortable and awkward that their parents are getting a divorce, even though, unfortunately, just about half the United States population of married people, at least first marriages, end in divorce. It may range from like 45 to 55 or so percent. And then with high school kids, you want to be careful because they will often isolate, or they're going to communicate. And with middle school too, they may start communicating less with their parents and more so with their peers. With high school kids, you want to watch out for behaviors that could represent more, again, isolation and depression and anxiety. They might start behaving in ways that are not so great sexually or with substance use and abuse, and a higher rate perhaps of depression and anxiety. So being very mindful of what the kids are going through, it's really important to not put the kids in the middle. And some parents really have a challenge with that. They put themselves before their children's well-being. So they put the kids in the middle. You've got to be really careful to not do that, and to remind kids whenever you're talking with them about divorce, and we can talk about how do you tell them, and that's a whole other conversation. But when you talk to them about it, they need to understand that there's nothing that they did that brought this divorce on, and that there's nothing that they can do about it. So that's very important. And also remember, we're the parents. It's our job as parents to take care of the kids. It's not their job to take care of the parents. But sometimes kids see their parents crying, sad, devastated, which of course can be par for the course, but then they think that they have to become sort of caretakers to the parents. And we have to really be careful with that. So watching out for certain signs that the kids are experiencing, whether they're little bitty ones and maybe they're not sleeping through the night anymore, they're wetting the bed, or they're having a hard time going to school because they're going to be away from the parents, or the older kids who maybe isolate a little bit more, or who are a little more secretive, or who are more anxious, more depressed, maybe starting to drink more, or act out sexually, and again, the grades falling and things like that. So being aware of those things. So if you see that, if you notice that, really, that's a good sign to get these kids some help. And there are plenty of therapists who can help with that. I work with older kids. I don't work with the little bitty ones. I'll play with them, but I don't necessarily work with them in a professional capacity. But there are so many therapists who do know how to work with the little ones and help them process their feelings. And as parents, we have a responsibility, as best we can, to keep the conflict away, because the higher the level of conflict between the parents, the lower the level of mental and emotional stability of the children. So we can directly, if we keep the conflict away from the kids as much as we can, that's going to ensure better mental and emotional health than if the parents are constantly arguing and just constantly, and then if they're not being very kind or even neutral toward one another. Again, putting the kids in the middle. So there's a lot of information there that really speaks to what the kids often go through. Yet again, on the other end of the spectrum, as I said before, there are some kids, sometimes it really is actually best for kids. It's best for kids to have a divorce. And we can talk about parenting styles. There's so much to talk about with that because there's so much that changes. There's a book that I read years ago, something along the lines of, Mommy, why are you and Daddy getting a divorce, and when can I have a hamster? The attention span, with the little ones is not that great. So really meeting them where they are. And most kids want to know what's coming up next. What they want to know is, the little ones at least, where am I going to sleep tonight? Who's going to take me to school and pick me up from school? Who's going to take me to the birthday party? Where am I going to spend? So these specific questions, kids want to know. But the older the kids get, the more they can turn into themselves and rely more on their peer groups for information and comfort and company and things like that. So if you notice things that, if your child is really struggling, that's a good time for them to get some support.
My parents divorced in my senior year of high school. And all I was concerned about was, how is that going to affect my senior year? As I got older, I saw that my parents just had it was my dad. If I had to pick somebody whose fault it was, my dad really treated my mom in a way that he shouldn't have. He wasn't physically abusive. He was a gambler, and he did things that my mom had to pick up the pieces for. And I think that was it was sad for me to see, but my mom stayed in that for so long because of my brother and myself. She made a lot of sacrifices for us, but I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
I was concerned about, how is this going to affect my senior year? That was what I was concerned about. And when I went through my first divorce, my children were 8 and 4. And it was a very different situation. Obviously, there was a lot of abuse at play, but to them, it was more or less, what does that mean? Where are we going to live? Where's Daddy going? It wasn't so much the emotional, it was more of the, where are we going to eat? Where are we going to sleep? Where am I going to go to school? Who am I going to play with? Is everything in my life going to be the way that it was? I have experiences that I've had in my life where parents have shared absolutely every aspect of the divorce with the children to, I think, purposefully build wedges that you can't break down those walls. My mom never talked bad about my father, ever. I could see it. I could see what was going on. She never sat me down and said, you understand? No, I could see it. And sometimes we think we have to tell our kids stuff. They can see it. They can feel it. They know when things are going on. But just because your child is of age, you don't need to share with them text messages and emails and papers from your attorney. None of that needs to be put in front of your children because you're forcing them into a position of choosing. So if you have a mom who's crying a lot and the kids are looking at it, she's going through a divorce, obviously she's sad. So now, in addition to her showing us all the paperwork, my dad is the reason why she's crying. So now let's all hate my dad. Just as much as you can, be there and be supportive of them and be readily available for them. It doesn't mean, though, that your children get the right to treat you in a horrible way either. You have to set boundaries around that. Yes, they're hurting, but so are you.
We have to remember that adults have difficulty managing their emotions. So we cannot expect children to manage their emotions so well either, especially in a situation where they have no control.
Right.
That being said, yes, we have every right, all of us, we have every right to feel whatever we feel. That's all right. And we need to be aware of how we feel. It's how we deal with it. That really is the issue. So if a parent is getting abused by the child, that's not okay. How the parent responds, if the parent is there to listen and to interact with the child, if the child is angry and starts berating one, let's just say the mom, comes home from school and starts berating the mom, this is where good communication skills really come in, because the parent can say, I know you're hurting and I want you to talk to me, so tell me more. Rather than getting angry with the child or upset with the child for the energy that child is putting forth. Now, again, there's a line between sharing feelings and how you share it. If the kid is yelling at the parent and it going on and on, that's a different story. Then you have to, I would agree, put some boundaries up and teach the child. How do you express your feelings? How do you get these feelings? Because this is hard. It's very hard. So counseling is helpful there, even family counseling. I'll talk with parents and kids about this because the kids need to process this as well. And they might very well be, let's say they take it out on one parent but it's, let's say, the other parent's fault, for lack of a better word, for the divorce, but they don't feel comfortable enough letting it out with that other parent. So sometimes the kids will let their feelings out in more expressive ways to the parent they feel more comfortable with or more connected with. But yes, there's definitely a line. It doesn't give a child the right to abuse the parent, but that child needs to learn, just like the parents need to learn, how to effectively communicate and deal with and process these feelings. And yeah, so one thing I'll mention is it can get out of hand. Like you had mentioned before, it can get out of hand where a child feels a split loyalty or has to choose one parent or the other. And that could lead into the other parent, let's say, feeling alienated. And that's a whole bag of worms there, if you want to call it that. We can talk about that too. But helping a child manage his or her feelings is really helpful. But this is hard for everybody. But that doesn't mean the parent has to be abused, that child.
When we're upset, we just want to have our feelings validated. Being able to validate them and say, listen, I understand you're hurting too. And let's talk about that. That's a powerful way to bring somebody down pretty quickly. How do you advise your clients to get through it if the other parent is disparaging them in front of the children?
So taking the high road is often a big challenge. And I went through my divorce. I was thinking that it's been about 17 years since my divorce was final. It took about a year and a half to get through it, but I would say, really good most of the time about not saying anything disparaging about my kid's dad. And fortunately, we have a good relationship now. It's fine now, but going through it was rough. There are going to be exceptions. I would say, don't kick yourself if you slip every once in a while and make a comment or something. But I think what you're talking about is a little more significant than that. Let's say little Johnny comes home and says to his mom, Daddy says that because of you, he has no money and he's not able to pay his bills. And why do you have to do that to Daddy? And of course, it can go either way. Mommy, Daddy, or Daddy, Mommy, doesn't matter. But I'm just giving an example. In this kind of a situation, because I know parents who just won't respond. I don't think that's so good, because if you don't say anything, the kid is going to believe what he or she hears often. But not to disparage the parent back. Instead, you might want to say, that's not true. Actually, there's more information, but that's not for you kids to know. And your dad nor I, neither one of us, should be saying anything like that in front of you kids. When your dad says something to you like that, I just want you to understand, first of all, he shouldn't be saying anything like that. Second of all, I want you just to be aware that there's probably some more information there, but that's not for you kids to be aware of. So I'm sorry that happened. You can address the problem and you can counter it, again, without disparaging the other parent. You can certainly let the child know that's not okay. And that's not disparaging the other parent. If you come back and say, or no, like, he cost me this much, it is very tempting to say, to defend yourself.
Defend yourself, yeah.
If it's accurate, but that's not the time nor the place. Because what you're doing is modeling to your children decency, dignity, and respect. So it'd be good if you were that parent who can model decency in front of the kids, because what will happen, as you said before, kids see things and they get to know both parents without either parent saying anything. Mm-hmm. So just do the best you can. And if it's really awful, like really bad, then if you can take it up with the other parent. It's possible that other involvement needs to happen. Again, this is not everything. You don't need counseling for everything, but this is the sort of thing that a child can understand. When parents get divorced, it's very stressful. It's very hard. And everybody has their own way of dealing with stress. My way might not be your way. And some people really struggle when they're stressed or when they're having a hard time. We can tell our kids that we all handle things differently, but how we handle them, what we say, really can make a big difference. So I would say I am an advocate of speaking up for yourself without giving too much information and really disparaging the other parent.
It's a tough road. Even in regular relationships, you hear things and there's always more story, right? There's always more story to something. And I've just learned, maybe as I've gotten older or more mature, or I just don't want to waste my energy on it. It's unfortunate. I'm sorry that person said that. I'll pray for them. It's a very tough situation all the way around, but taking the high road, setting boundaries, and finding support, like people like you, people like me who can be there. Is there a right way to tell children that you're going to go through a divorce?
So I think, yes, how you tell a child or the children is very important. If you're meeting with more than one child at the time, or at a time you want to speak to the level of the youngest child, but it's probably not the best idea to tell a 5-year-old at the same time you're talking to the 17-year-old, because you're going to speak differently. Is it best, if you can, to do it together and know what each person's going to say so that you can look united as co-parents? Yes. Does it always work out that way? No. And it takes planning. It takes coordination with the other parent if you're going to do it in a healthy way. I know when I was going through my divorce, there are things that I would certainly do differently now, knowing what I know now. But when you're telling the kids, again, it's in the best of all worlds. It can be like, we've realized that we are going to be happier and healthier and have a healthier family if we're not living together anymore, if we're not married anymore. We can each spend as much time with you as possible. We each want to. This is, again, in the best of all worlds, but it really just depends. A lot of times parents aren't going to sit together and tell their kids. But if you're going to do that, talk about it first. Who's going to say what and how? And then, again, the kids, you don't know how the kids are going to respond. Sometimes they just might be like, what took you so long? Why is this? Right. You should have done this years ago. Or they might be quiet. They might just break down and cry and just run to their rooms. You just want to be available for them to talk. And if a child has siblings, then oftentimes siblings can talk about it together and they can just deal with it together in different kinds of ways. But how you tell is important. And also, as you had touched on before, not to share information. They don't need to know certain information because it's only going to hurt them. What's ideal is if you have two healthy enough parents, meaning one parent is not abusive and one parent is not so toxic and high conflict that is really unhealthy for the child. It's very important to nurture the relationships with both parents and encourage the children that it's okay. I want you to love your other parent. Other parent wants you to love me. And we want to have that kind of good parenting relationship with our children. But again, that's a whole other talk as far as when you're dealing with toxic people. But to answer the question, yes, how you tell the kids makes a big difference sometimes.
So in a normal situation, there's probably, so if they're younger, is it just more or less trying to keep as much stability and consistency as possible and be there and supportive? There's really nothing to sit them down and say if they're too little.
Right. If they're too little, they're just going to adapt. The parenting plan can make a big difference too. The custody plan. So some people are week on, week off. Some people are every 2 days, every 3 days, every other weekend, once a week. But you don't want to have a plan that's every other night because that's really disruptive to the kids. So when you're trying to design a custody settlement or a parenting plan, you want to really think about the ages of the kids and what's best for the kids as far as that. But to have them be able to predict and know where they're going to be on what nights, and have even something on the refrigerator, a calendar, so they know, oh, Tuesday and Wednesday I'm going to be with Dad, or Monday and Tuesday I'm going to be with Mom, or whatever it is. When they know where they're going to be, it helps them be able to predict and plan. So yeah, as much as possible, the little bitty ones, again, let's say up to 2, 3, they're going to go with the flow. Really going to go with the flow most of the time. It's, as you say, when they get a little bit older, they want to know where they're going to sleep, who's going to take them to school, pick them up, and that sort of thing.
There are so many things that you'll learn along the way, navigating divorce, taking the high road and trying to be as stable and as grounded and as available for your children. That I think is probably the most important thing, is understanding that. But understanding along with it comes a lot of confusion, which is why Dr. Wilder and I decided to do this segment, because we both work in this space and we want to be there as a resource for you. So we are going to wrap up another episode, and you really want to come back for next week's episode to see what we're talking about, because we are going to dive deep into parental alienation.
Oh, okay.
And that's a doozy. We have experienced it up close and personal. And I've seen a lot of my clients deal with it, and I'm sure yours too, Dr. Wilder. So thank you, everybody, for joining us again for another episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. And we will be back with a question of the week, and we'll see you next week as we talk about parental alienation. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
That's a wrap for this episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. If this conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, healing, growth, and transformation happens one conversation at a time. If you have a question, a story, or a topic you'd love for us to explore, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note at questions@drdecoded.com. Your thoughts and experiences are always welcome here. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week for another insightful episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. Until then, take care and keep moving forward.